Hi and welcome to this video in the MRDCL Understanding Concept series, and in this video we're going to be looking at how you can obtain the size of variables or tables so that you can perform automation. So what do I mean by that? Well, there are times when you want to know how many responses there are in a variable or how many rows or columns are in a table so that something is automated in the preprocessor so that you get the number of tables, the number of rows, or the number of executions of a particular statement that you particularly want. So let's bring that to life and explain what I'm talking about here. All right, so we've got a very simple script here. We've got a gender question at the top, and we've got a variable called main car, which picks up 11 codes, make 1 to 10 and other. And then it comes down here and has a rating. So what the respondents do is that it's a single variable main car. They rate their main car. And then we've got a makes considered here, which is also the same 11 makes as well. Now let's say what I want to do for this rating question here. I don't want a table of ratings just on its own by a standard banner or anything else. I actually want a table for each of these makes individually filtered on the make. So I'd actually want 10 different tables here, one for each make, or people choosing that make for the rating question. So how do we do that and so that it's automated? All right, so we look at the first table here and we analyze main car by the standard banner, which is gender. And then we've got this line of code here, which is the line that performs the magic. So this says set an integer, an index called cars, and set that to the number of items in the variable main car. So up here, main car has 11 codes. So it's going to set cars to a value of 11. Now that syntax looks a little bit strange. It's nothing else perhaps quite like it in the preprocessor. But the set command is the same, but this syntax here, percentage items bracket main car with a square bracket after it, means that in cars we'll have the value 11 in this particular case. And then you can see I'm looping through from 1 to cars minus 1. So what I'm doing here, I don't want a table for the other. So I'm just going to take the value with 1 less than what cars is returned and loop through that, and then you can see I'm using a filter statement to filter on each of the 10 makes, knowing that others is the last one, and producing a table with that filter. So let's look at that and see what it produces. And run it, and I've got 13 pages coming out there, and you can see here's my first table, and then I've got a table filtered for each make. Make 1 down to make 2, make 3, and if I jump down to the 10th make, there you can see I've got a 10th make, and it then goes on to the next table. It's not doing a table for the others. And just to show that that's working, so we produce 13 pages there. I can change this now to 12. I actually also need to change this line of code down here because it uses the same text. And of course I need to add in the new make 11. And run that, and you can see now I've got 14 pages in here. And if I look at my tables, you'll find there's also a table for make 11. There it is. That's been added after make 10 to give me a table for make 11. So a really nice tool there. Now that becomes particularly useful, not in this particular example, but let's say this had 237 brands in there and they were non-consecutive codes. That would be quite time consuming to count that. And what if that changes that variable in future? Perhaps it's a tracking study and the next wave there's more brands. You probably want the same number or the requisite number of tables to automatically come out if that particular variable changes. And also that variable could be fed dynamically, maybe from a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet using EPS, so that the brands were picked up from somewhere else. Then you want the tables automated as well. So you can really start to plug in some automation here. All right, let's look at another example now. The next example comes down here, And what I want to do now on this table, if we look at the makes considered table, let's just run that and have a look at that. And if I go to makes considered, so you can see this table here now, 25 respondents, and they consider any number of makes, and you've got different answers for each make. Now let's say we want that table based on the number of makes. The only way to do that is to add up all the makes here and replace that 25 there with the sum of all these rows. Now, of course, again, the number of rows may change. So if we had more makes added to our brand list, that would mean adding more rows. And if you don't want to change your script so that that's automated, there's a nice way of doing that that's a very similar concept to what I showed before. So this time, I'm actually going to set the rows as being, the index rows as being percentage rows, the number of rows in this table. Now, where did I get this table from? What I've done here, I don't know what table number this is, and indeed if I added some more tables at the top it might change. I think it's going to be about table 13 or something, but I don't particularly care about that. But if I use a set command immediately after this table here, in the set command, this table, the index this table, will get set to the value of the table number as it is at that particular moment. So I can set this table equal to T, and if it's table number 13, this table will take the value 13. If there were an extra table added in here, it will go one higher. And then it means that I can refer to that in here. So I can say that this table, row 0, is this table, and it's the sum of all the rows. So if we look at that in the listing file, that'll be a bit easier to read. So let's go down to the manip stage, and now you can see there it is. It's table 14, that table. I want to sum the rows, and I'm just replacing row 0 of table 14 with the sum of the 12 rows. Now what that means in table 14, if we go back to our tables, and here's table 14, you can see now I've got 65, so that was the original table with 25 in the base row. This table, based on the answers given, it says here, has got 65 people in, so consequently it will add to 100%. But of course, what's nice about this, if we added some more brands in or some more makes in, it would automatically add in the extra rows, sum them for me, and reflect in the base exactly what I want. So some really nice powerful tools in there for automation. And the last example, or the third example I've got here, is some code that I'm currently skipping. So I'm going to take these skips out and then explain to you what I'm doing. So this is more of a hypothetical situation. Let's say that any tables in here from 1 up to the highest table number. So I've got a loop here of A equals 1 to whatever the highest table number is. Let's say where the base in any cell is 0, I want to replace it with the word empty. Now, I probably wouldn't want to do that in the real world. I might want to use blank column suppression and suppress it that way. But let's say I want to put the word empty out there instead of the figure 0 in the base row where a base is 0. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm saying set cols is percentage cols of each table. So I'm looping around and reading each table, which is up to table 16 or 15, whatever it is. And I'm getting the number of columns in that table, because the number of columns may vary for each table. Again, in this particular case, everything is analysed by gender. So actually, we know here the number of columns is actually 3, because there's a total column 1 for male and column 2 for female, which of course is 3 rows in total. But of course each table could have a different number of columns in another example. So I pick up the number of columns, and I'm saying that for row 0 in column 0 to cols -1. So it's going from column 0 to column 2, which is the female column, in the text column where the values between 0 and 0, replace it with the word empty. So let's look at that in the let's run that first of all, and then we'll look at it in the preprocessor just to see what it's done for me, just to make that syntax clear. So what it's saying is for every table in row 0, if any of the cells are between 0, any columns between 0 and 2 have a value between 0 and 0, put out the word empty. And sure enough, now if we scroll down my tables, wherever it finds a base of 0, it will pull out the word empty. So here we are, there's nobody in the female column there, so it's put the word empty out. Now, I'm not saying you want to do that in the real world, but it's just illustrating how I can test for something. Here we are, empty here, and I think it's working absolutely fine. So that's really the power of these tools, so that you can automate things. Now, there's one little thing you need to know, or is worth knowing, and it hasn't hit as an issue here. If you put a command in here, so say we say set count equals percentage items bracket dollar main car, so I'm counting the same variable here as I do further down the script. Now, you might encounter a problem with that, and the reason you encounter a problem is that the way that MRDCL is running is that it might not have written away the size of that variable by the time it's actually processing that little bit of preprocessor code there where it's getting the value. Let's just run it and see if it works. It may not. Indeed, I've got something here where it's trying to refer to main car and it's not even available. Now, the reason for that is that it's just too fast. The processor was too fast to be able to get the number of items. And the way round that is just to put in a couple of lines of ignore, something like that. If you think that looks ugly in your script, what I actually often do here is I put that into a separate file, call it ignore.stp. So I've saved it, and then in here I can just insert ignore.stp or insert ignore, and it should work absolutely fine now. And if I look at the script that comes out of that, what it's done, it's put in ignore, 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 which gives the processor just that microsecond it needs to be able to store the number of responses in that variable. Now, that wasn't a problem in my earlier example because we were referring to things that were much further up the script. So when I was doing my counts, they had already been processed many rows before. So it's only if you put it sort of straight after the actual variable or the table that you want to refer to, you need to do that. But anyway, it's a really powerful automation tool. It can really help you. I find it really valuable on tracking studies, so I really think it's worth considering and utilizing when it's appropriate. Thank you for joining me.